Matthew Stafford is on the trading block. Aaron Rodgers is trying to find a new home, and the Bengals have an important decision looming over their franchise. We dig into the top 3 biggest offseason storylines around the NFL in today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, and when I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just head over to FanDuel.com today to get started. This week, we're going to go through the top 12 off-season storylines that we will be following that are very important when it comes to fantasy for next year. And we're going to start with the top 3 today. You know, we have all of a sudden the Rams are granting Matthew Stafford permission to seek a trade. Aaron Rodgers gets cut from the Jets. And then, of course, we have that huge decision from the Bengals where they have to decide, do they sign both Jamar Chase and Tee Higgins to long-term contracts? So let's first start with Matthew Stafford. Where does he play in 2025? And let's first start with, do you actually think the Rams are considering trading Matthew Stafford?
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces going into this, right? Because we're not sure where the top quarterbacks are going to land. The Titans and Browns have been all over the place, and you have Shedeur Sanders, who's only trying to go to Tennessee or Cleveland, but that may not happen because you have Cam Ward, but then you have a drop-off. You don't know when these other guys are going to go off the board. Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers, some of these other dudes in the draft. You have no idea. They could go anywhere from the mid-second round to late third round to on day 3. So the supply and demand of quarterback is not very healthy. We'll just say that. And the guys kind of in the quarterback carousel that everyone is watching, Matthew Stafford and Aaron Rodgers. And then you look at Sam Darnold as a free agent, Kirk Cousins, where's he going to go? Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. So it's all revolving around these guys that are available. And Stafford is the most appealing of this group because he's still playing at a pretty high level. He's most recently, we know, won the Super Bowl. So I think he's going to try to go to the place where he can best extend his career and put up some numbers. So the hot rumor is the Giants right now. I do not see a scenario where he ends up, say, on the Jets or Browns. That just seems not very good for Stafford, like he's in a better position. So I think it has to be something where he can either lead a young team and take that challenge. And the Giants have some appeal, right? Because they have Malik Neighbors. They can bring in some more weapons here. They have some draft capital that the Giants could do some damage and have a big turnaround. So that's something we're going to watch. Now, there's other teams that are going to be involved. The Steelers. Michelle Steelers have been rumored a lot for Stafford. That also would be a bit appealing, right? It's a team that's always winning. You need a guy with a big arm, can stabilize things a little bit in that offense, know exactly what they're going to get, a pocket passer. So there are a lot of landing spots here, but I think it's looking like the Rams just want to start over because they're talking about Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp. So I have a feeling he wants to move from the Rams, and I think the Rams kind of are nudging him out the door.
Yeah, he just turned 37 years old just a couple weeks ago. I don't think that's too old where you say he's definitely like fallen off the cliff, right? But he did average his career low in passing yards per game this past season, just counting seasons he played at least 12 games. And he tied his career low with 20 passing touchdowns in seasons he played at least 12 games. So we saw the drop off a little bit this year. He also struggled mightily under pressure, which hasn't always he normally was typically pretty good under pressure, but lately it's gotten low. Still very good when not pressured, but the only quarterbacks that had a worse passer rating than Stafford when under pressure this year was Anthony Richardson, Bo Nix, and Gardner Minshew. Definitely concerning there. I don't know what would be a good fit for him. I think this is my concern, right? Like I think he with Sean McVay is such a good fit. You got the Titans, the Browns, the Raiders. They all need quarterbacks. You mentioned the Giants, but they do all have early draft picks. Do they just go with a rookie? Like you said, it doesn't really make sense for the Jets to go there. Maybe the Colts. I don't know. Maybe the Steelers, like you brought up. But does he really fit with Arthur Smith? I don't think so. I do think a really interesting landing spot for him would be the Seahawks. But would the Seahawks move on from Geno Smith to then, trade for Matthew Stafford? I think with their defense that's growing and with Mike McDonald, I think that could be a really interesting landing spot. But then also with the Rams trade Stafford in division, it's a really hard thing to find a trade for him here, unless it's the Giants.
Yeah, I think that's why everyone's defaulting to the Giants, right? It seems like the one that, okay, it's not a very good team, but it seems like the most stable kind of organization at this point, because Brian Dable at least has been there for a while with Mike Kafka. So you know what you're going to get. You do inherit a pretty elite young wide receiver immediately, and Stafford and Malik Neighbors will probably get on the same page quickly and make things happen. So I think that is the biggest appeal. But you're right. It's hard to find a fit for Stafford. Now, the other way around is pretty hard as well. But there are some clear candidates, right? I don't know. There's been a rumor of the Rams kind of just trading quarterback rooms with the Vikings, like going after JJ McCarthy and then getting Sam Darnold in free agency as kind of the bridge. But I think a more realistic option for them that wouldn't be that expensive, right? If they're trying to bridge and transition, is go for Kirk Cousins and then draft a guy. So it could be the Kirk Cousins part 2, right? Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix Jr. It could be Kirk Cousins and a draft pick they're interested in, maybe Jackson Dart or someone of that nature, Quinn Ewers or some stash later. Maybe they look at Stetson Bennett. I doubt it. They're not looking at him maybe as the future, but maybe a developmental backup still. So I think you could see a combo of quarterbacks there. Find a McCarthy type that could fit the system that's kind of adjacent between Kevin O'Connell and what Sean McVay runs, and he kind of have a satellite of it with the Falcons. So there's all kinds of places where this offense is run, which has created a few more backup and potential starters for the Rams. But again, the Rams are going to take a downgrade no matter what. Stafford has fit in the system so well, unless it's Jared Goff, which I don't see happening. Back to the Rams, I think they're going to take a hit. I think they're okay with that. They have a young defense. They're rebuilding. They're seeing what they can do now with the offensive side. They were so quick to rebuild their defense. I think I would have confidence in McVay and less need to do this for their offense.
It will be interesting to see if Stafford is traded, what we feel with Puka Nacua, right? Because like you said, most likely whatever quarterback they bring in, it's going to be a downgrade. I know there's some rumors about Aaron Rodgers too. I don't know in what world you move on from Matthew Stafford to just go get older Aaron Rodgers coming off the Achilles, who was not better than Stafford whatsoever last year. So I wouldn't get that move at all. And then it's really Sam Darnold's out there, right? And I could see Sam Darnold working with Sean McVay and actually being pretty solid, right? Solid enough where he could feed Puka Nacua. They would definitely regret the decision. I think once it got near the playoffs and Sam Darnold was Sam Darnold again and made stupid decisions that Stafford, they didn't get with Stafford. But I think that's the one quarterback I could see them bringing in where you wouldn't push on Puka Nacua too much.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully the system is so good that if it's someone reasonable in this system that has had some experience or exposure to it, that they're going to be decent, right? Because Sean McVay is going to get the most out of that player. I mean, we saw quickly he turned around Jared Goff. Goff was a disaster before he got there. He played so well. Stafford was having the interception issues and kind of trying to find his identity again when he left the Lions. And he quickly reestablished that immediately here with McVay. So that's the good news, right? A lot of these guys are going to fit well and produce and do well enough to facilitate some of this. But I think Nacua, however you look at it, he's going to be a target monster because if Cooper Kupp's out of the way and Stafford goes, whoever's the replacement quarterback is going to target him a ton.
Now, maybe it is Aaron Rodgers. Maybe that's who's going to replace him, but that's where we're going to get into next. Does Aaron Rodgers have a next home? Is there any team interested in him? Is he worth it anymore? We're going to dig into Aaron Rodgers right after a quick break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and it's an exciting time. The NBA is all over the place, right? I mean, people are getting hurt, but there are a lot of healthy players out there, and the NBA action is getting started down the stretch run in the second half. When the game tips off, there's no better place to get in on it than on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout games, so even if you miss opening tip-offs, or want to bet on fourth quarter comebacks, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for bigger payouts, you can even combine your live bets into same game parlay, so it's always good. You have Luka Doncic in an interesting situation facing off against his former team, the Mavericks, so he'll be a little bit motivated there, as well as the Lakers to prove that trade was justified. So maybe a good combo that you can look at here this week. And FanDuel has great live betting features because every moment of the game is exciting for you, whether you're backing your team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three-pointer. You never feel like you missed your chance. Plus, the app is really used, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Michelle, time to continue the show and look at Aaron Rodgers. Now, I will start with this. There's a crazy rumor that's flying around. We just talked about the Rams, that Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams are both going to end up in Los Angeles replacing Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp. Now, I think this is a ridiculous rumor. I just don't see the point of this, right? Going old quarterback to old quarterback, as you mentioned, and old wide receiver to older wide receiver on this team. Like, I don't get it at all. I don't see how it makes them a better team. But what do you think is a realistic landing spot for Aaron Rodgers? Because if we go for the Rams, it suddenly jumps all the way down to the Titans. And then you're like, oh, no, that's not good at all.
I don't know if there is a landing spot I like for Aaron Rodgers because the play's just not there anymore with what he brings to the table. The headache he brings to the table, it doesn't seem like the locker room is always in on loving Aaron Rodgers besides Davante Adams, who can't get enough of him. And then you have the issues with, his drug stuff that he likes, shrooms or whatever. And then you have his isolation trips that he might take during OTAs or mini camp. You just never know what this dude's going to do. And 42 years old, he will be this year. I know Tom Brady played to 45, but that just doesn't typically happen, right? And this past year is when we saw the drop off with not even he's been bad under pressure for a long time. Even during his last MVP season, he was not good when pressured, but without pressure this year, he had a career low in pretty much every metric, 10 interceptions, 89 passer rating. When from 2018 to 2023, he had 112 passer rating without pressure. Only 6.5 yards per attempt, by far his career low without pressure. So even when he was being blocked and had no pressure, he was still not playing even close to his capabilities. Not very well at all, actually, because 89.2 passer rating without pressure is one of the worst in the league. So I don't think Aaron Rodgers should get another starting job. I just don't know what team should want him. Maybe if the Colts are desperate with the way Anthony Richardson has performed, but is that really the route they want to go?
Yeah, and remember we made a big deal about Aaron Rodgers not being able to get to 300 yards. I mean, that's not good. He's not going to give you anything on the ground. So if he's struggling to put up 300 yards in a game and multiple touchdowns and didn't take advantage of having Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams in the lineup, I don't understand why he would have any appeal. Now, I chuckled because I read this headline and I thought it was real, and it made a lot of sense for me on the Onion. It was numerous teams express interest in Aaron Rodgers playing elsewhere. That was just awesome. That's basically what I feel like. Is like other teams are like, please take him. Please be interested. We'll go in a different direction at quarterback. Like they want other teams to be interested in Aaron Rodgers because then it's like, okay, it opens it up for Matthew Stafford, opens it up for our draft pick. Maybe we just want to sign Sam Darnold or look at Kirk Cousins. I mean, Kirk Cousins is the same deal, and you'll get him a lot cheaper at this rate because Cousins has made a lot of money. So if he's going to play in the NFL, he's probably going to take a discount to play on that Achilles and just play. And Kirk Cousins might be the better option right now if you're looking for a pure pocket passer to do some things, because he did have a big game or two. They were both against the Buccaneers, it seemed like, but he still had a lot more that I could see in the tank as a passer than Aaron Rodgers did. So I don't know. Like the Titans basically would be like doing him a favor, I guess, to put him in there. Like I don't see him necessarily a great fit with that offense. The weapons also are a little bit up and down. Like, what are we going to get from Calvin Ridley and the rest of those guys? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if he actually makes them better than Will Levis and Mason Rudolph. So it's just very hard to see a good landing spot. Now, I guess we look at the Steelers, and I think the only reason I know you're shaking
Please
your head
no.
already,
Please no.
but the only reason is because they need a quarterback. That's basically why Stafford's been mentioned there. That's why Rodgers is mentioned there, because they don't have a quarterback right now under contract. So the only way I could see that work is Rodgers and Mike Tomlin are like, we're going to put aside all our other drama and just come together. We need each other if we're ever going to win big again, right? It seems like we're always doing something, but we haven't won in a while. And it's funny because their paths crossed in Super Bowl 45. So it's been a long time since that glory for both guys. So maybe it works. Maybe Arthur Smith is an okay guy. I don't know. But really, I've heard Aaron Rodgers to the 49ers. Get this out of here. It's like every rumor, everyone's just operating it. I'm guilty. I operated as though Aaron Rodgers last year coming back was going to be Aaron Rodgers we saw at the Packers in his better form. He's not that Aaron Rodgers anymore, and you can't expect that. I would be nervous if I was targeting skill positions from the team that potentially Aaron Rodgers would go to.
It is interesting. I just want to bring up one thing. He's been following pretty much the career path of Brett Favre, right? They both spent 18 seasons with the Packers before going to the Jets. They both played one full season with the Jets. Brett Favre goes to the Vikings. He actually had a really good first season with the Vikings, right? And remember, like Sidney Rice came out of nowhere, had a monster year with 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns, and then never did it again, never even close to it. So maybe Rodgers can go to a new team, get revitalized for one season. Who knows? I can't see a lot of like any team really dying for Aaron Rodgers. I think there might have to be an injury late in the offseason for him to get a job, right? Maybe late in training camp where a team's desperate. Maybe it is the Pittsburgh Steelers. I just really, really am hoping it's not, but I guess that does make sense for a team that would be interested. But yeah, I think Aaron Rodgers might be waiting a long time and might get his little feelings hurt for a while here. We'll see if Devontae Adams holds out as well, as long as Rodgers does not have a job. But we're going to talk about 2 wide receivers that are looking for long-term contracts, both for the Cincinnati Bengals. Can the Bengals afford to pay them both? I say yes. So I don't really understand what's the problem here. We'll get into it right after a quick break. All right, so the Bengals have to decide this offseason. They know they want Jamar Chase for the long haul, right? And he's due for an extension. I'm sure they're going to give it to him this year. We know he's going to get paid top of the market at wide receiver. I can't imagine he doesn't break the record, right? And then Tee Higgins, though, is now a free agent, and they already franchise tagged him last year. So do you want to tag him twice in a row? That's quite costly. Also, it's not going to make Tee Higgins very happy. Do you think that, A, they should sign them both long-term, and can they? I think they can pretty easily, but should they, Vinny? Go for it.
Well, the Bengals are just kind of a weird organization because in some ways they're willing, okay, you're a core player, we're going to pay you. And they got a little aggressive a couple of years ago in free agency with the Trey Hendricks deal, and they kind of spent some money. So they're kind of were, I guess, conservative with their money, but now they've opened up the checkbooks a little bit, and the salary cap always seems to accommodate as it goes up every year. Now we've seen this happen. Obviously, the Super Bowl champions were able to do with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. We've seen the Dolphins do with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. To some degree, the 49ers were able to get Brandon Ayuk under contract when they still were paying Samuel a ton there. So you can pay the 2 wide receivers. It's just making the choices, right? I think basically you have to pick 3 or 4 core players that are the biggest keys to your success. And right now, keeping Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase are big to their success because Joe Burrow is key to their success. And I think the one other core guy you would say right now is Trey Hendrickson. He just led the league in sacks. So those 4 guys are the guys that if they're going to bounce back and get to that 2022 form, those are the guys that have to be on the team, right? So again, if you do the franchise tag, it bumps up exponentially by 20%. So you're looking at essentially a $48 to $49 million guaranteed contract over 2 years for Tee Higgins. you can get better cap relief if you pay both these guys at the same time. That you can change the way you work the cap. I think they can move some players. I think Sam Hubbard would be a candidate to trade their other defensive end if they're keeping Hendrickson. So there are some people they can move on from easily. Actually, I don't think they should just stop at keeping Higgins and Chase, Michelle. I think they need to go after another receiver. I think they need to go after another tight end. Mike Gesicki is the free agent. So I don't want them to go get a replacement for Tee Higgins. I want them to get a compliment like a Tyler Boyd type, get a tight end, really load up for Joe Burrow with some youth, some guys that can explode, have your two core receivers. So that's really what I want the Bengals to do. And I think they will follow through. I just don't think they should go the tag route and make Tee Higgins upset here.
No, I don't think they can go to tag route. Just extend them, and they have plenty of money, so they're projected to have around $65 million in cap space, and that's before they do anything else: trade, cut anyone, restructure anyone. And that's already with Jamar Chase set to have a $22 million cap hit this year, right? So if they extend him, they could actually even lower that if they want to. But let's say they wanted to go, heavily towards this year. It's not going to be that much more than $22 million in a year, right? So that's not taking up very much cap space in what they have available right now. And you talked about the Eagles, right? It's not just that they figured out a way to pay A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith top money, which both, like, Chase will make a little bit more than A.J. Brown, and Tee Higgins will likely make a little bit more than Devonta Smith. But they also are paying Jalen Hurts pretty much the same that the Bengals are paying Joe Burrow. They're also paying Dallas Goedert, fourth most among tight ends. Saquon Barkley, third most among running backs. Their left tackle, Jordan Mailata, fifth most among tackles. Landon Dickerson, most among guards. So it's like they figured out how to pay a ton of positions on their offense, top money. And right now, the Bengals only have to worry about Burrow, Chase, and Higgins. I mean, they don't have a running back or tight end that they're paying really anything to. They have Orlando Brown, who I guess is kind of top. He's like 12th most among tackles, but that's really the only other pricey guy. They don't have a ton of defenders, like you said, that they have to pay. It's Trey Hendrickson. So you pay these core guys that matter so much to your team and figure out the rest later. I pulled the numbers real quick for Joe Burrow with both Chase and Higgins this year compared to just Jamar Chase. Now the numbers are great either way, but he averaged 23.5 fantasy points per game in the 11 games that he got to play with both this year, and only 20.2 fantasy points per game in the 5 games with Jamar Chase only. So like he still was really, really good at 20.2, right? But 20.2 is kind of like, that's a really good fantasy quarterback, but it's not elite. It's not league winning, right? But that 23.5, you're starting to get up there with the Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. So there is that little bit of a gap when he doesn't have Tee Higgins, averages nearly 40 passing yards per game less without Higgins. So I will say, I think both are highly important to what Joe Burrow's fantasy ceiling is, although he can be perfectly fine with just Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I think the Eagles set a really good blueprint because that's how you can win the Super Bowl, is that you can find young secondary players. You can find a pass rush by committee after you have one guy who's the big disruptor, right? You can do that. You can fill those holes pretty well, and other positions on your offensive line. And again, the Bengals, I think they could move on from Orlando Brown Jr., look at upgrades of tackle and guard and other positions here and get youth to serve them a little bit. So again, you follow the blueprint. Again, keep those core guys in your offense so Burrow can keep playing at MVP level. You know they're essential to him. And even if they have some foibles on defense, it's okay. They can go pretty far with just their offense, and they were almost in the playoffs with just offense and a terrible defense. If they'd started a little bit hotter, I think they would be in there and may have been a dangerous team. So they don't have to do a lot, but the one thing they do need to do is keep Higgins and Chase intact. And again, add to those weapons. Don't just sit on those two guys. Get some more and really pour it on and really have this offense that's versatile, really hard to stop, much like the Eagles were this season, where it was hard to contain them when all their guys were healthy. Eagles didn't lose when they had Jalen Hurts, Devonta Smith, and A.J. Brown. They didn't lose a game. So maybe, I don't know if the Bengals will be as fortunate with their trio, but just keep in mind those guys were the most essential in their run when you looked at it overall.
Yeah, and I mean, when Tee Higgins, I felt like, was finally like super healthy out there with Chase. I mean, they went on a pretty good run streak there to end the year with both of those guys. So, and then when you transition to the other side with Tee Higgins, I know people would be really excited to see him get to be a wide receiver one with the team, right? But when you really consider the teams that are needy of a wide receiver one, with the Patriots and the Browns and the Raiders and the Panthers and the Titans, it's like, would you rather Tee Higgins be the wide receiver one with those teams, or just be the wide receiver two on a super, super pass heavy team like the Bengals with one of the best quarterbacks in the league? I'd rather take that wide receiver two position with Joe Burrow than any of those wide receiver ones. I think there's only one spot that would be truly an upgrade in it, like for fantasy, and it would be with the Bills, because he would be Josh Allen's wide receiver one. Maybe the Chiefs, but the Chiefs have a lot of weapons too. But yeah, I guess those two landing spots, the Chiefs, the Bills, would get us very excited. The rest, it's like, I think I'd rather him just be a wide receiver two than a wide receiver one.
Yeah, if the Bengals pay him, I think he's going to stay there. I think he knows it's the best situation for him, and that's what he's looking for. He's just looking for that respect. And again, I think I would say he can assume if your teammate just won the triple crown of receiving, I mean, you're the number two on this team. Like, no matter how you look at it, you're the number two. If everyone's like, oh, we're co-number ones or whatever, I don't think you would hear that from Tee Higgins, because he has a lot of respect for what Chase can do with Burrow, and he's going to take his money, and that's how he's going to get paid, right? I mean, we saw that Devonta Smith, AJ Brown, there was a disparity. Who was the one creating things for the number two? It's Brown and then Smith. So I think the same thing will happen here. Again, it's all out there for the Bengals. They have the money, they have the parameters, they have the examples. Just do it and get this over with, and then we can love Joe Burrow as an elite fantasy asset again.
We definitely will. I'm really hoping they get this done. Even as a Steelers fan, I still want to see fun offense for the Bengals. I do enjoy watching Burrow with all of his fun pieces. And like you said, don't end there. Keep adding for Burrow. Give him a tight end. Give him better running back. Let's go. Let's get this. They have a bad enough defense where we can get all the fantasy points we want from their offense. That is it for today's show. We're to go through the rest of the top storylines of this offseason throughout this week. Tomorrow we'll bring you 3 more, so don't miss it. We will talk to you then. Bye, y'all.